Should the Dallas Cowboys give a contract extension to Pro Bowl center Tyler Biadasz this offseason? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, it's Friday. We are talking about the interior offensive line of the Dallas Cowboys. What could be better?
Not much. I was just gonna say, you're gonna ask me how I was doing. I was like, you just told me how I'm doing. I love talking offensive line, especially interior offensive line play, and obviously Dallas Cowboys are one of my favorite teams.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of questions about this group. We're going to talk about whether the Cowboys should give Tyler Biadasz a contract extension, whether they should bring back Connor McGovern next year. Is there anybody down the roster that could maybe step up in 2023? But we got to start with the guy over my right shoulder right here, Zack Martin. I mean, what an awesome player. My only question for you is, have you seen any signs of decline in his play at all over the last couple of years?
No, I mean, no, not too much. I think we saw a holding penalty this year, but yeah, I think for the vast majority of his snaps, he looks exactly like the same guy. There were definitely points during the season when I felt like he had bad games, like and didn't play. Again, let's keep it relative to Zack Martin, right? Like, I think that there were times when, especially early when Tyron Smith was debuting on the right side, where it felt like he had his plate full a little bit, trying to like help Tyron do his job and that sort of thing. But I think for the most part, what you've seen is incredibly consistent player, continue to be incredibly consistent. And I imagine, just by the nature of the position and the way he plays the game, he's got, several more years of this level of consistency in him, I would think, just based on the trajectory of what we've seen so far.
No, I do have some PFF numbers for you that might be a little bit concerning. Here are some of his percentiles among offensive guards over the last couple of years. So his pass block grade in 2021 was a 96. We saw that regress to 94th percentile last year. This year, his pass block grade on true pass sets regressed from 98th to 96th percentile.
Oh no!
I know it's crazy, but he's now in like the 93rd, 94th percentile in almost every single stat. So not quite the absolute best offensive guard in the league in every single stat, but pretty darn close. I think we're darn close.
Yeah. I mean, again, like the bar that you're talking about with the guy, he's a Hall of Famer that's playing on the field, so I think that's the bar that you're looking at is, did he lose? He lost more than 3 reps this season. It's like
kind of crazy, right?
He's the standard. There's a reason that guys like that we all like look to for a lot of the stuff, like Duke, they all point to him as the gold standard at the position. Just again, I think the stat that is just shocking, that again continues to shock, that we were reminded of this year because of the holding penalty, is that he has more all pros than he does penalty holding calls against him in his career, which is that sums it up pretty well. If I could say anything else, honestly.
Did not give up a sack this year.
Yep.
His last QB hit that he gave up was in week 12 against the Giants. Only had 2 QB hits allowed all season long. Final 7 games of the season, he allowed 3 combined pressures. He's still pretty good.
He's pretty good at football. Pretty good at football, that Zack Martin guy.
I mean, I don't know what else we need to say. I mean, the only other question I have is, like, how long can we theoretically expect him to be? Maybe not the best guard in the NFL, but a top 3, top 5 guard at the position.
Yeah, I think with him, it's all always been about technique and how immaculate that is. That plays well for a long time. So it's about health at this point. Staying healthy. We've seen a couple different times when he's gotten ankles, twisted under him, or he's had a knee buckle on, or he's had to go on the sideline, and we've all held our breath. And then just to see him come back out in the next play, he's just. I mean, when you're tough and smart and talented and technique is the tool that you use to kind of pummel the opponent, you can play in the NFL for a long time as an offensive lineman.
It's just going to be how long he wants to play. I mean, guard is a position that we've seen historically that guys can play into their mid-30s at a high level. I even think of like somebody like Brian Waters, who was briefly with the Cowboys. Like he was playing Pro Bowl caliber football into his 36, I think, when he came to the Cowboys. And he was still playing awesome. Zack Martin's 32. I think he turns 33 in November. I mean, I would say at least 2 more super high quality years from him coming up, as long as he wants to keep playing.
Yeah, I would say 35 is right around the time that you start to see get an idea of where the rest of his 30s are going to be, right? Like that's 35 is right around, well, either he'll start tailing off here, or maybe he's able to plateau this for a couple more years until he's ready to quit.
What an awesome player, man. I'm just so thankful that I've got to cover this team for basically this whole decade, and Zack Martin's been a part of it. He's just an awesome player. Let's talk about the rest of the Cowboys offensive line and whether or not they should give contract extensions this offseason to Connor McGovern and Tyler Biadasz next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on literally anything from point spreads to money lines to the number of points a player will score, the number of threes drained in a game. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Landon, let's talk about Tyler Biadasz, who was now going into year 4. Came off, I think his best season of his career, was named to the Pro Bowl as an alternate. First of all, what did you think about him last year? And are you open to the idea of giving him a contract extension this offseason?
Yeah, I think we saw Tyler grow a lot, especially the second half of the season. It just felt like he's been playing really good football at the end of the year last year. I had expected a kind of a big jump this year. And I think early on, a lot of kind of what the offensive line was doing was basically just holding on for dear life as they were kind of trying to survive the offensive line changes, right? Yeah. They had to throw Connor McGovern in at the left guard. They had to move Tyler Smith out to left tackle. And I think a lot of it was just kind of discombobulating, especially early on, against Tampa, especially that week 1. I think as the season wore on, Tyler became a better and better player. Maybe even more so than his progression from the beginning of previous season to the end of last season. I think the injury was incredibly unfortunate at the time that it happened. But I also think that Tyler proved something to himself and maybe to us too a little bit by coming back from that injury so soundly and then playing good football.
Agree. Yes,
I think that was that's a huge. You think about like what we talk about, what's important with the offensive line, and we talk about continuity. We talk about playing next to the guy next to you, and a huge component of that continuity is what we just talked about with Zack Martin, right? Is you're getting beat up, you're getting banged up, your ankle's getting turned underneath you. Somebody rolled up on you. Somebody fell on you. Somebody cheap shotted you. Zack Martin, one of the reasons Zack Martin is because he continually takes all that on, just like every other offensive lineman, and then continues to stay in the game, and continues to play at a high level. And I think those two things together are, one is just about toughness and about what you're mentally able to kind of get through physically, and the other one takes a real skill to be injured or hurt and then still continue to play at an incredibly high level. Like, that takes fortitude and skill. And I think that's what we've seen from Biadasz this season, that he's really kind of taken his game to the next level where, I think that by the end of the season last year, I felt confident in Biadasz when he had it all together, when it was healthy, when everything was right. I felt like he could perform. Now I have a little more confidence in his game, and the fact that I feel like his game is durable. Not just he is durable, but his game is durable, and that he's able to play through injury, still at a high level. So it's a subtle difference. It's a subtle point. But I think when you're talking about offensive linemen, consistency is the key, and consistency is measured in time on the field, time on task, and how you're performing even when you're not necessarily at your best. And I think that's where Tyler really shined this year.
I agree with all that. I don't think I would give Biadasz a contract extension this offseason.
Yeah, I didn't even answer your question. I'm sorry. Yes.
Right.
Having said all that, I kind of think I actually agree, right? Like, let's answer your points, because I want to hear your points on it.
I just think we need to see more, right? Because there has been a little bit of up and down with him week to week. I want to see him continue to improve. And maybe something as trivial as making the Pro Bowl last year will be a huge boost to his confidence.
Maybe.
And being able to overcome that high ankle sprain. I just want to see him one more year in the system. The Cowboys have a tendency to pay some of these players later and pay more because they want to see more, right?
Yeah.
I think DeMarcus Lawrence was the first example, right? They played with DeMarcus Lawrence on the franchise tag twice, and then they paid him a long-term deal because they just had more confidence after they saw him play 5 seasons or whatever it was. They did the same thing with Dak. I wouldn't be surprised if they do the same thing with Biadasz, where let's see you play out your rookie contract. If we need to give you another 1-year deal just to make absolutely sure that you are a top 10 center, we're good with that. I think I'm good with that as well.
I think they would rather overpay and then feel like they're going to get the consistency, and not know, than to try to get a cheap deal now early and then be stuck in a contract with a player that it turns out they didn't want to be with.
Well, I mean, frankly, the last couple times that they've given players contracts early, it's come back to bite them, right?
Jalen Smith and I think
Tyrone Crawford, right? They thought Tyrone Crawford was going to develop into something different. He never did.
And I think that, it's unfortunate because I think, circumstances swung them this way back and forth, right? They had success before all those contracts doing exactly what we talked about, signing guys early Tyron Smith is the best example, right?
Yes,
of signing a contract early, maybe getting a team friendly deal and then living fantastic.
There was more certainty in Tyron after 2 or 3 years than what we've seen in Biadasz, right?
Exactly. So I think that's really been I think what's changed is the threshold for those deals, right? Like, you need to meet a higher threshold in order to kind of warrant those deals. And we need to see you prove it a little bit more. So I do agree that I think that's kind of the case here. And I do think, despite the fact that he got to a Pro Bowl, there is improvement that can be made at center. It's not like Tyler was anything close to perfect. I do have faith that he's going to be a better player this year than he was last year, because for all the reasons we just talked about, the experience, and I think he can grow from that. Do I think is that stopping me from falling in love with someone like the Minnesota center Schmidt? No, it's not. I think that there's always room for improvement. So I'm not going to marry myself to Biadasz quite yet. I think I would like to see one more year of an even step above where he is now. And then you can feel confident about signing a guy who, even if you here's the other thing too, you sign him to a deal, he's still pretty young, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So
he's 25. Funny enough, him and Zack Martin both born on November 20th. Kind of funny.
Oh, wow. That is funny. So he's still really young. And so you could sign him to a kind of longer term deal and still have him before his, 30th year birthday. And if he takes a step from here above, I think that certainly would warrant kind of a longer term deal for a guy like that, because center is not an easy position to necessarily find.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Connor McGovern. We did touch on him a little bit yesterday, but um, first of all, how did you think he played last year as a full-time starter at left guard? And would you be willing to pay him in free agency this offseason?
I think he did well. I mean, again, like, as much as we need to give credit to Tyler Smith for what he was able to do as far as kind of turn it around quickly and turn into a left tackle despite having worked all off season, we do need to give some credit to Connor McGovern to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, and he did, and he was ready to kind of step in and be the starter at left guard, and frankly, as much as anybody on this offensive line, Connor McGovern has been kind of pulled and moved around and just in and out of the starting lineup and just kind of asked to do a whole bunch of different stuff. And, again, to his credit, did it without complaining, was a good teammate. He's well liked in the room for what it seems like. He's a good worker. I mean, none of those things are concerns. I think where I have concerns with McGovern is I'm just not sure if he's talented the way that you want necessarily as a starter, or someone that you're going to be paying, money. I think he's probably a average to replacement level guard at this point.
I would agree.
Yep. So I guess the question now becomes, look, again, this is not a slight or saying that he's a bad player, but left guard is the weak link of the offensive line. And so it was throughout the season. Except when Tyler Smith was in there playing left guard. And even then it may have been. I think that they probably need to look at an upgrade here. Whether that's through the draft or through free agency. I just think, I think if they wanted to re-sign Connor McGovern, they're doing so with the idea that they're hoping that he has a similar situation with Tyler Biadasz, so that he takes what he learned last year and then takes a step forward. But I just don't know the value necessarily in taking that gamble at $4 or $5 million when there's changes in continuity, so you don't get the benefit of that with him. I just think that it's a new offensive line coach. There's not necessarily a reason to bring him back like you would in a situation where, let's say, we were just running it back with the same coaches and the same coaching staff. Like, I just don't think that there's as much benefit for bringing Connor McGovern back. And I do think that it is possible that you could improve the position and thereby improve the offensive line overall.
I think it depends on the money, right? Like, if he gets the Connor Williams deal this offseason for Miami, which was like, was it 3 years, 24 million, something like that, I'm good. Just
good luck.
Hey, go get that money, Connor.
Yeah,
but if it's
absolutely.
But if it's like 3 years, 10 million, I think we're having a different conversation, right? Like, because at that point, that's almost backup interior offensive line money, right? Like, that's swing money. So I think that part of it's going to have a big impact here, because you said it. I think he's an average guard in the NFL. That's still valuable, right? Like, look around at a lot of these teams in the NFL, even the teams that are in the playoffs. Like, you know how much the Bengals wish they had average guard play in that AFC Championship game against Kansas City. So, again, I think it depends, but I'm also not opposed to being like, you know what? We think we can improve this position without even having to spend money in free agency and without having to spend, our first round pick at it. So I'm just curious to see what the Cowboys do here, because I think they're going to be fine either way.
Yeah, I think that they'll be able. Look, I don't think they're going to have a problem finding a left guard. Let's put it that way. Like, Connor McGovern is the floor, right? If you want to sign him, I think you probably could sign him. And frankly, if you wanted to sign him and still draft a guy, I think that would make sense too. You still have you mentioned Zack Martin is 32 years old. We're hoping that he has 2 or 3 more, very high level years than years beyond that. But we don't know. Injury could happen. Anything could happen. So
the good news about Connor McGovern is we've seen him play right guard. And for whatever reason,
he's very good at right guard.
He's a very good right guard. It's just it's so wild to me. I don't know.
It is. Yeah. So I do think that if they're going to re-sign Connor McGovern, they should still try to insulate themselves and maybe go draft a guy as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about some of the down roster interior offensive linemen on this team. More on that next. This episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM app. You've heard us talk about this mobile game before, and I can't tell you how much fun I had competing against some of our fellow Lockdown NFL hosts. It was just a blast all season long. Now it's your turn to compete. We're going to get to more of that in just a second. But if you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, your dream has come true, and this game is definitely for you. You're going to manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through seasons, and lead your team to glory, trying to build a dynasty. With the Ultimate Football GM app, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of the season. All of this in a challenging and realistic game world. The Ultimate Football GM app is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go and as you want to and when you want to. We've created a Locked On League for you to compete against the other Locked On hosts. Can you be the ultimate Locked On Football GM? Choose the Locked On League in the App Store to join. We'll see if you can create your own football dynasty. Locked On Cowboy listeners get a 100% free boost to the franchise when using promo code Locked On in the game store. That is Locked On, all caps. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That is ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Landon. We talked about the three starters on the Cowboys' interior offensive line. Is there anybody down the roster that you kind of have your eye on as potentially a starter moving forward?
I expected Farniak to take a little bit more of a step last year than he did, I think. And I think he still had some good moments in training camp. And I think that there were times, even in the game when he was in there, that he did fine. I would like to see exactly where he goes from here. I think he could be an interesting guy in the offseason as someone who, was in the weight room again for another off season and just kind of continue to develop a little bit. I like him a lot because I think he's strong. I think he's got some size to him. And I think he can play some center. He was a guy that we had kind of talked about potentially getting opportunities to kind of compete with Biadasz to start at center last year, the year before that. That hasn't ever really kind of developed. Like that competition just never really happened. As Biadasz gets closer and closer to his free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if you did see more and more of them trying to see exactly what they have in Farniak, simply because maybe he's a cheaper alternative when it's time for contract time. So he's a guy that I would definitely keep an eye on. Another guy that I think that, we saw a steady usage of, he's a little bit older than some of these other guys. We talked about the Waletzkos and the kind of the tackle types, but the other interior guy besides I just said his name, Farniak, sorry, is Dakota Shepley. Is a guy that they had gotten. He kind of had been a little bit of a journeyman throughout the years. He's interesting because they kept on bringing him back and they kept on kind of having him in, and he became like a real big part of the line room. The guys in the room apparently really, really like him. I'm wondering
about him now.
Oh no, what is it?
Cowboys are really upset about this one, by the way. So the Cowboys had to make a
oh no, that's right. I totally forgot about
that's
that.
Right. So I'll explain for people that. So Dakota Shepley was somebody who the Cowboys had on and off their active roster all year long. Okay. And then when they went to the playoff game against Tampa Bay, they had to technically release somebody to get down to 53-man rosters. The idea was just they were going to put Shepley back on the practice squad, pull him up the next week. The Colts claimed him, which is kind of one of these things where it's kind of like an unwritten rule. Like, hey, you don't claim players that playoff teams release because they're trying to win. And it was a bummer for Shepley because now he's not on the playoff team when he has a chance to play. Yeah. So Shepley's now actually on the Colts, but this was somebody the Cowboys did really like. He was on the roster for most of the year.
Yeah, and I think that they were really kind of angling towards him having a bigger role next year. I
Yeah.
mean, they kept him. It was noticeable how much movement they did to kind of try to continue to keep him on the roster. So that's a bummer. Honestly, I completely had forgotten, and with all the other news that had happened with the playoffs,
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten that. But I mean, just to kind of comment on him, I thought that he was a guy that they really were kind of positioning to, be a part of the roster next year, if not as a backup center, maybe as a swing interior guy. They were trying to kind of collect these guys. I think the one thing that the Cowboys offense, not front office, I guess, has done a good job of, I think, these last few years is not getting into a position where they're shorthanded with offensive linemen.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
they've really just turned over every stone and trying to find these guys. So Farniak isn't enough, right? You get Dakota, you get some of these other guys, and then see what you can do. So I like that strategy. Continue to invest in the numbers there, because as we saw this year, it comes in handy. It certainly comes in handy to have all those bodies down there.
The other thing we didn't mention, we're 25 minutes into this podcast now, is there's a good chance, like actually really good chance, that one of your interior offensive linemen next year is just Tyler Smith, right? Like starting at left
Yeah.
guard. And if that's the case, all of a sudden you don't really have any concerns about your interior offensive line at all. Biadasz is your center, Zack Martin coming back at right guard, Tyler Smith year 2 at left guard. You're hoping with one of Farniak and Alex Lindstrom, who we haven't mentioned yet, kind of
Yeah.
develops into that swing interior guy, and you're fine. But I do think no matter what happens this offseason, the Cowboys have got to add somebody else to this group, whether it's a third or fourth round pick. Just draft somebody to kind of start developing in case you do lose Biadasz next offseason, if case Zack Martin retires or whatever.
And the other thing that we honestly, I don't even know, have we even mentioned this on the show yet? That Mike Solari is the offensive line coach now. I mean, I think that so much news happened that we should just mention that real quick. The Cowboys have changed their offensive line coach. I mean, I think that that's going to have, and we can have a whole conversation about Solari and his beliefs and system and that sort of thing. But I think that is just a note to keep in mind when discussing the interior offensive line, is that we are projecting, maybe they do something similar to what they did last year. This OL coach may have a completely different idea of what he's looking for. So it could be that this whole thing gets reshaped because now you have a different OL coach who's deciding where everyone's going. So that's something to keep in mind with every one of these guys, and not just like, where their development is, but also where they are in regards to whether the coaching staff likes them, because that has everything to do with, especially with some of these down roster guys, with how their future is going to be on this team.
Athleticism. That's what they're going to be looking for this offseason. I can guarantee they want guys that can move. So if you can't move, I don't think you're going to fit. At least that's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they switch to more of an inside zone system, they may want some bigger, stronger guys at guard, but you're going to definitely have to be able to move. You got to be able to get to that second level.
Yep.
You got to be able to hit those linebackers. So, strength will be important still, but you're not wrong. Athleticism, being able to get on the hoof, those are going to be important factors for offensive linemen moving forward with this team.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Go check us out on YouTube as well. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend. Landon and I will be back on Monday to talk about some potential first-round wide receiver prospects Cowboys could be interested in. See you guys then.